at A Whisper from Croton. Picture this, a young woman walking barefoot across warm marble tiles as the Mediterranean sun filters through olive groves. The year is around 530 BCE, and the coastal city of Croton hums with an energy unlike anywhere else in the ancient world. This is southern Italy, where Greek colonies flourish like jewels scattered along the shoreline, and where one particular community is about to change how we think about mathematics, music, and the very fabric of reality itself. Her name is Theano. And tonight, she's going to help you remember something important about your own brilliant mind. I'm here with you now as you settle into this quiet hour. Whatever brought you here tonight, whether it's the weight of expectations, the endless mental juggling, or simply the need to step away from performing for everyone else, you can let it all rest here. We're going to travel together to a place where a woman's intellect was not just welcomed, but celebrated, where her voice carried across centuries, even when others tried to silence it. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let's walk together down that ancient path. Theano arrives in Croton on a day when the wind carries the scent of wild rosemary and the distant sound of lyres being tuned. She's traveled far to reach this place, drawn by whispers of a school where numbers dance with music, where the movements of stars reveal divine patterns, and where, most remarkably of all, women study alongside men as equals. The Pythagorean community isn't like other philosophical schools of ancient Greece. Here, nestled between rolling hills and the sparkling Ionian Sea, something revolutionary is happening. As Theano approaches the white stone buildings that house this unusual brotherhood and sisterhood, she can hear voices engaged in passionate debate about mathematical ratios and the harmony of the spheres. But let me tell you what strikes her first. It's not the impressive architecture or the famous reputation of Pythagoras himself. It's the sound of a woman's voice, clear and confident, explaining the relationship between musical intervals and numerical proportions to a gathering of eager students. In most of the ancient world, such a scene would be unthinkable. Here, it's simply Tuesday afternoon. Theano pauses at the entrance, her traveling cloak dusty from the journey, her mind sharp with anticipation. She's heard rumors, of course. They say Pythagoras believes that souls have no gender, that wisdom can bloom equally in any willing heart. They say his community includes women who teach, who write, who contribute to the great work of understanding the universe's hidden patterns. As someone who has always felt the pull of numbers and the music they make when they dance together, Theano has dared to hope these rumors might be true. The first person to greet her is another woman, Arignote, perhaps, or Maya, one of the other female members of this extraordinary community. There's something in her eyes that Theano recognizes immediately. The look of someone whose mind has been allowed to roam free, whose thoughts have been taken seriously, whose contributions have been valued not despite her gender, but simply because they're brilliant. "Welcome," the woman says, and in that single word, Theano hears an invitation to become fully herself. Over the following days, as Theano settles into the rhythms of Pythagorean life, she discovers something that will shape not just her own destiny, but the course of mathematical and philosophical thought for millennia. This isn't just a place where women are tolerated as students. It's a place where they're expected to contribute, to teach, to push the boundaries of human understanding. She watches as the community gathers each morning to share their discoveries from the night before. Someone has found a new relationship between triangular numbers and perfect squares. Another has composed a melody that demonstrates the mathematical ratios underlying musical harmony. A third has identified patterns in the movement of celestial bodies that suggest deeper cosmic principles. And the women's voices are as prominent as the men's in these discussions. Theano finds herself assigned to study the golden ratio, that mysterious proportion that appears in nautilus shells and flower petals, in the spiral of galaxies and the architecture of the human body. As she delves deeper into this work, she begins to see connections that others have missed. The golden ratio isn't just a mathematical curiosity. It's a key to understanding how nature creates beauty, how the universe organizes itself according to principles of harmony and balance. But here's what's truly remarkable about this moment in history. In a world where women's intellectual contributions are usually invisible, where their discoveries are attributed to male colleagues or forgotten entirely, the Pythagorean community is creating something different. They're building a space where brilliant minds can flourish regardless of the body they inhabit. As you lie there tonight, perhaps you can feel an echo of what Theano experienced in those first weeks in Croton. The relief of being seen for who you truly are, the joy of having your thoughts taken seriously, the deep satisfaction of contributing to something larger than yourself, not because you've made yourself smaller to fit in, but because you've been invited to show up fully. Theano's days begin to follow a pattern that feeds her soul. Morning discussions where ideas flow like water finding its level. Afternoon walks through the olive groves, where mathematical principles reveal themselves in the spiral arrangement of leaves and the proportional relationships between tree trunks and branches. Evening meals shared in community, where conversation moves seamlessly between the practical and the profound, and always threading through everything the sense that she's part of something unprecedented. A community where wisdom is valued over convention, where questions matter more than easy answers, where the life of the mind is seen as the highest calling for anyone, woman or man, brave enough to pursue it. The other women in the community become her sisters in the truest sense. They share not just living space and daily routines, but the deeper bond of intellectual companionship. Together, they're writing letters that will be studied for centuries, developing mathematical proofs that will influence generations of scholars, and creating a model of what's possible when women's minds are allowed to soar. But tonight, as Theano settles into sleep in her simple room overlooking the sea, she carries with her a question that will drive much of her life's work. If the universe is indeed structured according to mathematical principles, if number and proportion underlie everything from the smallest grain of sand to the largest constellation, then what does this tell us about our place in the cosmic order? It's a question that will lead her to discoveries that challenge conventional thinking about mathematics, about nature, and about the divine patterns that connect all things. It's a question that will make her one of the most influential thinkers of the ancient world, even though many of her contributions will be overlooked or attributed to others by historians who couldn't imagine a woman capable of such insights. But that's a story for tomorrow's exploration. For now, let yourself rest in this image of possibility. A young woman walking confidently into a community that sees her brilliance and welcomes it. A mind being invited to expand rather than contract, a voice being encouraged to speak rather than whisper. As you drift toward sleep, carry with you Theano's sense of coming home to herself, her relief at finding a place where she doesn't have to diminish her light to make others comfortable, her excitement at the discoveries waiting just beyond the horizon of current understanding. Tomorrow, we'll follow her deeper into the mysteries of number and proportion, into the revolutionary ideas that made the Pythagorean community legendary. But tonight, simply rest in the knowledge that brilliant women have always existed, have always contributed, have always mattered, even when the world forgot to remember their names. The Garden of Numbers. The morning sun filters through the olive groves as Theano makes her way to what the community calls the Garden of Numbers. It's not a garden in the traditional sense. No flowers or herbs grow here. Instead, smooth stones are arranged in perfect geometric patterns across the sandy ground. Triangular formations, square arrays, pentagonal spirals that seem to draw the eye ever inward. She's been at the community for 3 days now, and each morning brings new wonders. The women here don't lower their voices when discussing philosophy. They don't apologize for their curiosity. They simply think and share, and build upon each other's insights as naturally as breathing. Numbers, says Helena, the woman who has become Theano's guide, are the language the universe uses to speak to itself. Helena is perhaps 40, with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes that hold the particular brightness of someone who has spent years discovering beautiful truths. She moves between the stone arrangements with practiced ease, adjusting a pebble here, realigning a row there. "Watch," Helena continues, crouching beside a triangular formation of white stones. One stone stands alone. Add a row of 2 beneath it. Now we have 3 stones total. Add a row of 3. Now we have 6. 4 stones in the next row, and we have 10. Theano kneels beside her, studying the pattern. 1, 3, 6, 10. She can see the progression, feel something stirring in her mind, like recognition of a half-remembered song. "These are triangular numbers," Helena explains. "Each one contains all the ones before it, plus one more row. They grow by addition, but they reveal something deeper about the nature of accumulation, of how small increments create substantial wholes. The morning air carries the scent of pine and the distant sound of voices engaged in discussion. Somewhere across the courtyard, a group is working through geometric proofs. Their voices rise and fall in the particular rhythm of collaborative thinking. Question, hypothesis, testing, discovery. But this is just the beginning, Helena says, rising and moving to a square arrangement of darker stones. Square numbers follow their own beautiful logic. 1, 4, 9, 16. Each one is a number multiplied by itself. But look, she traces the pattern with her finger. Each square contains the previous square, plus an L-shaped border. Theano sees it immediately. The way 9 contains 4, with 5 additional stones forming that distinctive L shape around the inner square. It's like each number has its own personality, she says softly, its own way of growing. Exactly. Helena's smile is warm with recognition. You're beginning to think like a Pythagorean. As the morning progresses, other women join them in the Garden of Numbers. There's Melissa, barely older than Theano, but already accomplished in the study of ratios. Erignote, whose specialty is the relationship between numerical patterns and musical harmony, and others whose names Theano is still learning, but whose intellectual generosity is already evident. They work together, not in competition, but in collaboration. When Melissa demonstrates how the ratio of consecutive triangular numbers approaches a specific proportion, the others gather around to see. When Erignote shows how certain numerical relationships correspond to pleasing musical intervals, they listen with genuine fascination. This is what Theano had dreamed of, but never quite believed possible. A place where knowledge is shared freely, where questions are welcomed, where the pursuit of understanding is seen not as an individual achievement, but as a collective endeavor. The master will join us soon, Helena mentions casually, adjusting a pentagonal arrangement of stones. He likes to observe how new students approach the patterns before he begins formal instruction. The master, Pythagoras himself. Theano feels a flutter of nervousness mixed with anticipation. She has heard stories, of course. The brilliant mathematician and philosopher who established this community. The teacher whose insights into the relationship between number and reality have drawn students from across the known world. But here, in this place where intellectual curiosity is the common currency, even legendary figures seem approachable. Human. What is he like? Theano asks. Demanding, says Melissa with a grin, but not in the way you might expect. He doesn't demand that you accept his ideas without question. He demands that you think. Really think, that you follow ideas to their logical conclusions, even when those conclusions challenge everything you thought you knew. He believes, adds Erignote, that truth reveals itself to those who approach it with both rigor and reverence. Mathematical truth, musical truth, philosophical truth, they're all connected, all part of the same underlying harmony. As if summoned by their conversation, a figure appears at the edge of the Garden of Numbers. Pythagoras is older than Theano expected, perhaps 60, with a beard streaked white and eyes that seem to take in everything at once. But there's an energy about him, a vitality that speaks of a mind still actively engaged with the mysteries of existence. He approaches their group quietly, observing as Theano works through a problem Helena has posed about pentagonal numbers. She's trying to find the pattern, the underlying logic that governs how these five-sided arrangements grow and change. The pentagon, he says finally, his voice carrying easily across the morning air, contains within itself one of the universe's most elegant secrets. Theano looks up, meeting his gaze. There's kindness there, and curiosity, and something else, a recognition that she has seen in the eyes of other true teachers. The look of someone who delights in watching understanding dawn in another mind. Each pentagon contains the golden ratio, he continues, settling cross-legged beside their stone arrangements. That same proportion you noticed in the nautilus shell, in the spiral of pine cones, in the arrangement of leaves around a stem, the ratio that appears wherever growth follows the path of optimal efficiency. He begins to demonstrate, using the stones to show how the diagonal of a regular pentagon relates to its side in that same golden proportion. His hands move with practiced precision, but his explanation is patient, allowing time for each concept to settle before building to the next. Mathematics, he says as he works, is not separate from the world around us. It is the world around us. The patterns we discover in these stone arrangements exist in the flight of birds, the structure of crystals, the orbits of celestial bodies. When we study number, we study the fundamental principles by which reality organizes itself. Theano feels something shifting in her understanding. Mathematics isn't just an abstract exercise, it's a way of seeing, a way of recognizing the underlying order that connects all things. But here's what makes our community unique, Pythagoras continues, his gaze taking in all the women gathered around him. We don't believe that this kind of seeing is limited to any particular type of person. Man or woman, young or old, Greek or foreign, the capacity for mathematical insight exists wherever there is curiosity and dedication. The radical nature of this statement isn't lost on Theano. In most places, such opportunities are reserved for men of certain social classes. Here, intellectual merit is the only qualification that matters. Your task, he says, addressing Theano directly, is not to memorize what others have discovered, but to develop your own capacity for discovery, to learn to see patterns where others see only chaos, to find the mathematical principles that govern phenomena others take for granted. As the formal lesson begins, Theano settles into the rhythm of genuine learning. Questions are encouraged, hypotheses are tested. When someone makes an error, it's treated as a step toward understanding rather than a failure. The sun climbs higher, warming the stones and casting shifting shadows across their geometric arrangements. But time seems suspended here in the Garden of Numbers, where ancient truths reveal themselves to patient inquiry, where brilliant minds gather to push the boundaries of human understanding just a little further into the light. Echoes in the study. As the days unfold in Croton, Theano finds herself settling into rhythms she never imagined possible. Her mornings begin before dawn, not with the domestic duties that once defined her hours, but with quiet contemplation in her small stone chamber. She traces geometric figures in the sand tray beside her bed, working through the problems that occupied her dreams. The community awakens gradually, voices carrying across the courtyard as members emerge for their morning meal. But there's something different about these conversations. Where once Theano heard only discussions of weather and household concerns, now she listens to debates about the nature of infinity, the relationship between musical harmony and mathematical proportion, the possibility that numbers themselves might hold the secrets of the cosmos. She joins Helena and the other women at a low table where figs and honey cakes wait alongside scrolls covered in diagrams. "I've been thinking about yesterday's lesson," Theano says, unrolling a piece of papyrus. If the golden ratio appears in pentagons, might it also govern other natural forms? Helena's eyes brighten. "Show us your thinking." Theano has sketched a series of spirals, each one carefully measured and proportioned. "I observed the shell of a nautilus at the harbor yesterday. See how each chamber relates to the next? The same ratio, over and over, creating this perfect curve." The women lean closer, their morning meal forgotten. This is how knowledge grows here, Theano realizes. Not through memorization or repetition, but through observation, connection, the patient work of seeing patterns that others might miss. "Brilliant," murmurs Erignode, Pythagoras' daughter, whose own mathematical insights are already becoming legendary. Nature herself seems to be a mathematician. After the morning meal, Theano makes her way to what the community calls the study, a large room lined with shelves containing scrolls from across the known world. Egyptian geometry mingles with Babylonian astronomy. Celtic knotwork patterns rest beside Indian calculations. This is perhaps the greatest library of mathematical knowledge ever assembled, and she has access to all of it. Today, she's drawn to a particular problem that has been troubling mathematicians for generations. How do you prove that the square root of 2 cannot be expressed as a simple fraction? She spreads out her materials, a wooden board covered in fine sand for calculations, several reed pens, and sheets of papyrus. The work requires deep concentration. She begins with the assumption that the square root of 2 can indeed be expressed as a fraction. Then follows the logical implications step by careful step. The mathematics flows like music, each line building on the last, creating an elegant argument that winds toward its inevitable conclusion. Hours pass unnoticed. The light from the high windows shifts and changes as Theano loses herself in the pure pleasure of mathematical reasoning. This is what she was born for. This dance between logic and intuition, this patient pursuit of truth through careful thought. May I see your work? She looks up to find Pythagoras himself standing beside her table. There's no interruption in his voice, no sense that she should apologize for her absorption in the problem. Instead, his expression holds the same focused interest she's learned to recognize in all the serious mathematicians here. I'm working on the proof about the square root of 2, she says, turning the papyrus so he can follow her reasoning. I think I found a way to show the contradiction more clearly. He studies her work in silence, occasionally nodding or making a small sound of appreciation. Finally, he looks up. This is excellent, Theano. Your approach is both rigorous and elegant. Have you considered what this implies about the nature of mathematical truth itself? The question opens new pathways in her mind. You mean, if some numbers cannot be expressed as simple ratios, then perhaps reality itself is more complex than we assumed. Precisely. The universe may be built not just on the harmony of whole numbers, but on relationships that transcend our everyday understanding of proportion and measure. This is how afternoons often unfold in the study. What begins as individual work gradually becomes collaborative exploration as members drift over to share insights or pose new questions. Theano finds herself at the center of these discussions more and more frequently, her ideas sought out and valued by some of the finest minds in the community. Today, the conversation turns to the practical applications of their theoretical work. Mathematics isn't merely an abstract pursuit, explains Philolaus, whose studies of planetary motion are revolutionizing astronomy. These patterns we discover, they govern everything from the construction of temples to the prediction of eclipses. And music, adds Lysis, demonstrating how different string lengths produce harmonious intervals. The same ratios that please the ear also appear in geometric forms. Theano listens, but her mind is making connections they haven't yet voiced. What if it goes even deeper? She ventures. What if mathematical relationships actually shape the way we think, the way we perceive beauty, the way we understand justice itself? The room grows quiet. This is a bold idea, one that pushes beyond mathematics into philosophy and ethics, but no one dismisses it. Instead, she sees the same look of intense consideration that greets all serious proposals here. Explain further, Pythagoras says simply. Well, we've established that certain proportions appear throughout nature, and we know these same proportions create harmony in music. What if human beings are naturally attuned to these mathematical relationships? What if our sense of rightness, of balance, of fairness, stems from the same cosmic principles that govern the movements of planets and the growth of flowers? The discussion that follows stretches deep into the afternoon. Ideas build and intersect, creating new possibilities none of them had imagined alone. This is the true magic of the Pythagorean community, Theano realizes. not just the accumulation of knowledge, but the collaborative creation of understanding. As evening approaches, the formal lessons give way to quieter activities. Some members tend the gardens where they grow herbs and vegetables, according to mathematical principles. Others work in the workshops, creating instruments and tools that embody geometric ideals. Still others gather in small groups for discussion or contemplation. Theano often spends these twilight hours walking the paths that wind through the community grounds. The gardens are laid out in patterns that reflect their mathematical discoveries, spirals and pentagons, triangular arrangements that demonstrate number relationships, carefully proportioned spaces that create a sense of harmony and peace. Tonight she pauses beside a fountain where water flows in measured rhythms, the sound creating its own mathematical music. Helena joins her, and they stand together in comfortable silence, watching the play of light on water. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Helena asks gently. Theano considers the question seriously. There are things she misses: the familiarity of established routines, the certainty of knowing exactly what was expected of her. But those seem small compared to what she's gained. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," she says finally, "but I wouldn't trade this for anything. Here, I feel like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be." Helena nods. "That's what true education does. It doesn't add something foreign to us. It reveals what was already there, waiting to be discovered." The stars are beginning to appear overhead, their patterns as mathematically precise as anything they study in the daylight hours. Theano feels herself part of something vast and orderly, a universe where beauty and truth interweave in endless, elegant combinations. Tomorrow will bring new problems to solve, new patterns to discover, new conversations that push the boundaries of understanding a little further. But for now, she is content to stand in this moment of perfect balance, surrounded by the gentle sounds of a community where minds and hearts alike can flourish. The loom and the cosmos. The morning sun filters through the olive trees as Theano makes her way to the weaving hall, her mind still turning over the mathematical insights from yesterday's discussions. The rhythm of her footsteps matches the gentle cadence of her thoughts, numbers and patterns flowing like water through her consciousness. The hall is already alive with the soft sounds of women at work. Looms stretch in neat rows, their wooden frames catching the golden light. Theano settles at her assigned place, running her fingers along the familiar wooden beam, feeling the smooth texture worn by countless hands before hers. "Good morning, sister." Helena appears beside her, carrying an armful of newly dyed wool. The colors are magnificent: deep indigo blue, warm saffron yellow, and a red as rich as pomegranate seeds. "I thought you might enjoy working with these today." The dye master achieved something quite special. Theano accepts the wool gratefully, marveling at the way the morning light brings out subtle variations in each hue. As she begins to arrange the threads on her loom, something stirs in her mathematical mind, a familiar sense of pattern beginning to emerge. The work requires precision. Each thread must be measured, positioned, tensioned, just so. But as her hands move through the familiar motions, Theano finds herself thinking about the golden ratio, about the way perfect proportions create harmony in nature. What if she could weave those proportions into cloth? The idea takes hold gently, like a seed finding fertile ground. She begins to calculate. If the width of one stripe relates to the next in the golden ratio, would the resulting pattern please the eye in the same way a nautilus shell or a sunflower does? Around her, the other women work in comfortable companionship. Some hum softly as they weave. Others chat quietly about their children, their studies, the small details of community life. The sound creates a gentle backdrop, a human music that soothes something deep in Theano's spirit. "You have that look again," observes Miriam, working at the loom beside her. She's an older woman, perhaps 40, with silver threading through her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. The same expression you wear in the study when you're wrestling with a particularly intriguing problem. Theano smiles, not pausing in her work. I'm wondering if mathematics might find its way into weaving. If there are proportions that could make a pattern more beautiful, more harmonious. Ah, Miriam nods knowingly. Leave it to a Pythagorean to find numbers in wool and thread, though I suppose— She tilts her head, considering. There is something musical about the way a well-planned pattern emerges, a rhythm that feels right. The conversation draws the attention of other weavers nearby. Soon several women have gathered, their hands never stopping their work as they discuss the intersection of craft and mathematics. It's exactly the kind of dialogue that makes this community so remarkable, the way practical skills and intellectual pursuits flow together naturally. As the morning progresses, Theano experiments with her golden ratio proportions. She measures carefully, marking her threads, creating stripes that follow the sacred sequence. 1 unit of blue, then 1.6 units of yellow, then 2.6 units of red. The pattern that emerges seems to pulse with life, each color transition feeling inevitable and perfect. "It's working," she murmurs, more to herself than to anyone else. The cloth growing under her hands has a quality she's never achieved before, a sense of rightness that goes beyond mere technical skill. Helena pauses in her own weaving to examine Theano's work. There's something different about this pattern. It draws the eye, but gently, like looking at a beautiful landscape that you never tire of seeing. By midday, when the women break for their meal, Theano's experimental cloth has attracted quite an audience. The golden ratio proportions have created something unexpected, a pattern that seems to breathe, to flow, to capture some essential harmony of the natural world. "You've woven mathematics into beauty," observes an elderly weaver named Sophia, though perhaps all good weaving does that in its way. We've simply never had the language to describe it before. The afternoon brings a different kind of work. Theano joins a group of women in the herb garden, gathering plants for medicines and household preparations. Here, too, she finds herself noticing patterns. The spiral arrangement of leaves on a stem, the geometric precision of flower petals, the mathematical relationships that govern growth and form. Her hands work steadily, selecting the best specimens of chamomile and lavender, while her mind wanders through interconnected realms of knowledge. The same principles that guide her weaving, that structure musical harmony, that govern the movement of celestial bodies, they're present here too, in these humble garden plants. "Theano." The voice belongs to Pythagoras himself, approaching through the garden paths. "Helena tells me you've made an interesting discovery at the loom today." She straightens, brushing soil from her hands. "I've been experimenting with proportional relationships in weaving patterns. The results are encouraging. I'd like to see your work if you're willing to share it." His tone is warm, genuinely curious. "We have much to learn from each other, I think. Your insights often illuminate aspects of truth that might otherwise remain hidden." They walk together toward the weaving hall, their conversation flowing easily between mathematics and craft, theory, and practice. Theano finds herself describing not just what she's discovered, but how the discovery felt, the moment when abstract numbers transformed into tangible beauty, when Pythagoras examines her cloth. He's quiet for a long moment. His fingers trace the pattern, his eyes noting the proportional relationships. Finally, he looks up with something like wonder in his expression. "You've created a bridge," he says softly, "between the eternal truths we study and the daily life we live. This cloth doesn't just contain mathematics, it makes mathematics visible, tangible, part of the human experience in a completely new way." The recognition feels like warm honey spreading through Theano's chest. Not because she needs his approval, but because he sees what she was reaching for, the integration of all aspects of knowledge into a unified whole. As evening approaches, Theano finds herself on the community's observation terrace, where several members gather each night to study the stars. The sky is clear, the constellations beginning to emerge in the deepening blue. She settles onto a cushion beside other observers, her day's work creating a pleasant tiredness in her muscles. "Look there," points Marcus, a young man who specializes in astronomical observations. Venus is particularly bright tonight. See how she seems to dance with the constellation of the Lyre? Theano follows his gaze, marveling at the celestial display, but her mind, shaped by the day's experiences, sees something more. The stars seem to form their own kind of pattern, points of light connected by invisible threads, like the warp and weft of some cosmic loom. "It's all connected," she murmurs, the realization settling over her like a gentle revelation. "The proportions in my weaving, the mathematical relationships we study, the movements of the stars, they're all expressions of the same underlying harmony." The others on the terrace nod in understanding. This is what their community seeks, not just knowledge for its own sake, but wisdom that reveals the deep interconnectedness of all existence. As the stars grow brighter and the night settles around them, Theano feels a profound sense of contentment. Her hands remember the texture of wool and thread, the rhythm of the loom, the careful measurement of golden proportions. Her mind holds the satisfaction of problems solved and new questions discovered. Her heart carries the warmth of community, of belonging to something larger than herself. Tomorrow will bring new experiments. Perhaps exploring how musical intervals might translate into woven patterns, or investigating whether the mathematical relationships in plant growth could inform their agricultural practices. The possibilities seem as endless as the star-filled sky above. For now, though, she is complete. A scholar and a craftswoman, a seeker of truth and a creator of beauty, an individual mind contributing to a collective understanding that grows richer with each passing day. The cosmos turns in its ancient patterns, and Theano turns with it, her life woven into the great tapestry of existence with threads of gold. After Pythagoras, but time, like the mathematical sequences she has come to know so well, follows its own inexorable pattern. Years flow past like water through cupped hands, seasons turning, students arriving and departing, knowledge deepening into wisdom. Theano has become more than a student now. She walks through the garden of numbers as a teacher herself, her voice gentle but certain as she guides newcomers through the mysteries of triangular numbers and sacred geometry. The younger women look to her with the same reverence she once reserved for Helena and the other masters. Her understanding has grown beyond what she could have imagined that first day when she stood at the gates of this remarkable community. The golden ratio is no longer just a mathematical curiosity. It has become a lens through which she sees the underlying harmony of all existence. In the spiral of a nautilus shell, the arrangement of leaves on a stem, the proportions of the human form, everywhere, the same divine mathematics revealing itself, but it is in the quiet moments, when she sits with Pythagoras in the evening light, that she feels most deeply connected to this great work they share. His hair has grown white over the years, his movements slower, but his mind remains as sharp as ever. They speak of numbers and music, of the harmony of the spheres, of how mathematics might unlock the deepest mysteries of existence. "You have become the keeper of something precious," he tells her one twilight evening as they watch the first stars appear. "Not just the knowledge itself, but the spirit in which it is sought. The understanding that truth belongs to no one person, no single mind." She nods, though she doesn't yet fully understand the weight of what he is telling her. The community feels eternal, unchanging, as permanent as the mathematical truths they explore together. The change, when it comes, arrives like a storm that has been building beyond the horizon. Political tensions in Croton have been growing for months. Whispers of suspicion about the Pythagorean community, jealousy of their influence, fear of their unconventional ways, the idea of women studying alongside men, of knowledge being shared freely rather than hoarded by the powerful. These concepts threaten those who prefer the old orders of hierarchy and exclusion. One morning, Theano wakes to find the community in quiet turmoil. Pythagoras has fallen ill in the night. Not the gradual decline of age, but something sudden and severe. She sits by his bedside with the other senior members, watching his breathing grow labored, his periods of consciousness briefer. In his lucid moments, he speaks not of regrets or fears, but of continuation, "The work must go on," he whispers, his eyes finding hers across the small room. "The knowledge we have gathered, the community we have built, it is larger than any one person now. It lives in all of you." When he dies 3 days later, the silence that falls over the community is unlike anything Theano has ever experienced. Not the comfortable quiet of deep study or peaceful contemplation, but the hollow absence left by a guiding voice that will speak no more. She finds herself standing in the Garden of Numbers, surrounded by the geometric patterns they carved into stone years ago, feeling suddenly adrift. Without Pythagoras, will the outside world still respect their work? Will the community hold together, or will fear and uncertainty scatter them like seeds on the wind? The answer comes sooner than she expects. A delegation from the city arrives within the week, their faces stern and unwelcoming. The Pythagorean community, they announce, has grown too influential, too different from proper society. The school must be dissolved, its members dispersed. It is then that Theano discovers something within herself she didn't know existed, a strength forged in years of intellectual challenge and collaborative discovery. Standing before the delegation, she speaks with a clarity that surprises even her. "The work we do here belongs not to Croton, but to all humanity," she says, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Mathematical truth cannot be dissolved by decree. The harmony we have found in numbers, in music, in the patterns of existence itself, these discoveries will outlive any of us and any political moment." The officials are unmoved, but her words have an effect she doesn't immediately see. Around her, the other members of the community stand straighter. Helena nods approvingly. The younger students look to her with new recognition. In the days that follow, as they prepare for the inevitable dispersal, Theano finds herself becoming something she never sought to be, a leader, a keeper of flame. She organizes the preservation of their texts, ensures that copies of their most important discoveries are distributed among trusted members. She helps arrange safe passage for those who must flee and coordinates with other Pythagorean communities in distant cities. But more than the practical arrangements, she tends to something more fragile, the spirit of collaborative inquiry that has been their greatest achievement. In quiet conversations with departing members, she reminds them that they carry within themselves everything they have learned here. The golden ratio will still govern the growth of flowers wherever they go. The music of mathematical harmony will still sound in their minds. "We are not ending," she tells them. "We are expanding, like ripples spreading across still water. Every place we go, every person we teach, every truth we share, the community grows larger, not smaller." As the last of the formal students depart, Theano remains with a small group of the most dedicated members. They cannot maintain the school as it was, but they can preserve its essence. In smaller gatherings, in careful teaching, in the quiet continuation of their research, the work goes on. She has become, without planning or seeking it, the inheritor of Pythagoras' vision, not as a single authority figure, but as a guardian of the collaborative spirit that made their discoveries possible. When young women arrive at her door, drawn by whispered stories of a place where female minds are valued and challenged, she welcomes them as she was once welcomed. The Garden of Numbers remains, though fewer feet walk its paths now. The golden ratio still spirals through seashells and flower petals, indifferent to human politics. The mathematical truths they uncovered continue to govern the movement of planets and the growth of trees. And Theano, who once stood nervously at the gates of an impossible dream, now opens those same gates for others. Her hair is beginning to show threads of silver. Her hands bear the marks of years spent weaving both cloth and ideas. But her mind remains as sharp and curious as ever. Still seeking, still discovering, still marveling at the elegant mathematics that underlies all existence. The community has changed, but it has not died. It has transformed, adapted, found new ways to flourish. Like the golden ratio itself, it has proven to be not just beautiful, but resilient, a pattern that endures through every kind of change. In the evening light, as she tends the geometric patterns carved in stone, Theano feels the presence of all who came before and all who will come after. The work continues, patient, persistent, eternal as the stars themselves. Nas, a legacy of harmony. The stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance, and Theano finds herself thinking not of endings but of continuations, of the way mathematical truth flows like water from one vessel to another, never diminishing, always finding new forms to fill. Years have passed since those first desperate days of preservation and protection. The immediate crisis has long since faded into memory, replaced by something far more profound, the quiet satisfaction of work that has taken root and flourished beyond anything she could have imagined in those early days of uncertainty. She walks now through gardens that exist not just in Croton, but in distant cities where her students have carried the seeds of their learning. In Alexandria, where Helena teaches young women the mysteries of triangular numbers. In Athens, where Marcus has established a school that welcomes minds of every background. In Syracuse, where Elena weaves mathematical patterns into cloth so beautiful that merchants travel from across the Mediterranean to acquire them. Each of these places carries within it the essence of what they built together. That revolutionary understanding that wisdom belongs not to the few, but to all who approach it with genuine hunger and dedication. The golden ratio spirals outward through human consciousness, creating new patterns of possibility with each generation that discovers its beauty. In her private moments, Theano sometimes unfolds the carefully preserved scrolls that contain Pythagoras' original teachings, not to worship them as sacred relics, but to trace the evolution of ideas, to see how each insight has grown and transformed through the minds that have embraced it. The theorems remain constant, but their applications multiply endlessly, like light refracting through a crystal into infinite rainbow possibilities. She has become something she never expected to be, not just a guardian of ancient wisdom, but a bridge between worlds. The young people who come to her now arrive carrying questions that would have been unimaginable in her youth, problems that require not just mathematical precision, but philosophical flexibility. The kind of thinking that emerges only when minds are free to explore without the constraints of convention or expectation. There is a particular quality to the light that falls across her study in the late afternoon, when the sun slants through the olive trees and illuminates the geometric diagrams carved into the stone walls. In these moments, time seems to fold in upon itself, and she can almost feel the presence of all those who have contributed to this great work. Pythagoras, with his passionate conviction that number underlies all reality. Helena, with her patient explanations of complex theorems. The countless students who have asked the questions that pushed understanding forward into new territories of discovery. The scrolls she has written in recent years contain not just mathematical proofs, but reflections on the nature of learning itself, observations about how communities of inquiry form and flourish, how knowledge passes from teacher to student and back again in an endless cycle of mutual enrichment. These writings, she knows, will outlast her physical presence, carrying forward not just the content of their discoveries, but the spirit in which they were made. She thinks often of the young woman she was when she first arrived in Croton, full of hunger for understanding, but uncertain whether such hunger was appropriate for someone of her gender and station. That uncertainty seems almost quaint now, viewed from the perspective of decades spent in communities where intellectual curiosity is the only credential that matters, where the beauty of a proof speaks louder than the social circumstances of the person who conceived it. The golden ratio continues to reveal new secrets, even after all these years of study. Just last month, one of her students discovered its presence in the arrangement of seeds in a pine cone, leading to a fascinating discussion about the relationship between mathematical ideals and natural forms. These discoveries no longer surprise her. She has come to expect that any deep investigation of natural phenomena will eventually reveal the underlying patterns that govern all existence. What does surprise her, still, is the way these mathematical insights continue to transform the people who encounter them. She watches young minds light up with recognition when they first grasp the elegant logic of a geometric proof, sees the moment when abstract numbers suddenly reveal their connection to the tangible world of growing plants and flowing water and wheeling stars. These moments of recognition are perhaps the greatest gift of her work. The opportunity to witness the expansion of human consciousness, one understanding at a time. The community that surrounds her now is both smaller and larger than what they had in the early days. Smaller in the sense that they no longer live together in one location, sharing meals and daily routines. Larger in the sense that their influence has spread across the known world, creating networks of connection that span vast distances and diverse cultures. She receives letters regularly from former students who have established their own schools and workshops, each adapting the core principles to their local circumstances while maintaining the essential commitment to inclusive learning and collaborative discovery. Reading these letters fills her with a satisfaction deeper than any personal achievement. The knowledge that ideas have their own life force, their own capacity for growth and reproduction and adaptation to new environments. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath between night and day, Theano sometimes finds herself calculating not for any practical purpose, but simply for the joy of it, tracing the relationships between numbers with the same pleasure that others might find in music or poetry. Mathematics has become for her not just a tool for understanding the world, but a language for expressing the inexpressible, a way of touching the eternal patterns that give structure and meaning to existence itself. The theorems she has contributed to the Pythagorean corpus will bear her name for generations to come, but this prospect brings her less satisfaction than the knowledge that somewhere, at this very moment, a young mind is encountering these ideas for the first time and feeling the same sense of wonder and recognition that first drew her to this path so many years ago. She has lived long enough to see her own students become teachers, to watch them develop insights that surpass her own, to witness the natural progression by which each generation builds upon the achievements of those who came before, while adding their own unique contributions to the great work of understanding. This is perhaps the truest measure of success, not the accumulation of personal recognition, but the creation of conditions in which others can flourish and exceed your own accomplishments. The olive trees that shade her courtyard have grown tall and strong in the decades since they were planted, their branches now providing shelter for birds whose songs accompany her morning calculations. Like the mathematical principles she has spent her life exploring, these trees represent the patient accumulation of growth over time, the way that consistent attention and care can create something far more beautiful and enduring than any single moment of inspiration. As evening approaches and the first stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, Theano feels herself settling into the deep contentment that comes from a life lived in service to something greater than personal ambition. The work will continue long after she is gone, carried forward by minds she will never meet, but whose discoveries she has helped make possible through her own patient contributions to the great conversation that spans generations and cultures and centuries. The golden ratio spirals outward through space and time, connecting the smallest flower to the largest galaxy, the humblest student to the greatest philosopher, the present moment to the infinite future, where new minds will discover new applications for these eternal truths. She has been privileged to serve as one link in this endless chain of understanding, and in that service has found the deepest satisfaction that human life can offer. The knowledge that her brief time in this world has contributed something lasting and beautiful to the great work of consciousness seeking to understand itself and its place in the cosmic order. In the gathering dusk, as the geometric patterns carved in stone catch the last rays of sunlight and transform them into dancing shadows that seem to move with mathematical precision, Theano closes her eyes and feels herself part of something vast and eternal and beautiful, a legacy of harmony that began before her birth and will continue long after her death. carried forward by the endless human hunger for truth and beauty and understanding, spiraling outward like the golden ratio itself through space and time and consciousness, connecting all things in patterns too beautiful for any single mind to fully comprehend, but perfect in their infinite, patient, eternal unfolding.